Welcome to a special update on the Belgorod K-329 Russian submarine. This submarine has been formally accepted into the Russian Navy and is now fully operational. We expect her to be stationed in the Pacific Fleet later this year. Let's talk about sources first. Thank you very much to Mr. H.I. Sutton. He writes articles for the navalnews.com. He has his own Twitter channel at Covert Shores and his own website with a lot of details on the submarine we're talking about today. So if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, definitely check out hisutton.com, Covert Shores' Twitter page, or his articles on Naval News. Big salute to Sam Legrone at the United States Naval Institute as well. He writes articles on this topic. I also reference globalsecurity.org, deepstorm.ru for a lot of the statistics to make sure that they make sense. And Joseph Dempsey has a great Twitter channel that talks about all things Navy, including the subject we're talking about today. So make sure you follow Mr. Dempsey on Twitter. All right, so what is the Belgorod? It is a modified Oscar II submarine. It comes in at a displacement of over 24,000 tons. This is a big girl, and she's over 600 feet long now after her modifications. So she is the longest submarine in operation today, longer than the Typhoon even. She's a special operations submarine is what Russia's classifying her as, but we'll talk about her full capability here today. She can still push about 30 knots despite her hull extension and has a test depth of about 1,600 feet. Very deep. All right, so what is the Belgorod? The Belgorod now, instead of being an SSGN like the Oscar II was, is a special mission submarine that acts as a mothership or a host, a mother submarine, to mini-subs like the Paltus and the Low Sharq. Those mini-subs can go down to very deep depths and manipulate and pick up items on the seabed, recovering planes, lost technology, or manipulating subsea cables, placing SOSUS and sonar sensors. They do all those things hosted by the Belgorod, and they do it all while submerged. They don't need to surface to dock and undock these mini-submarines. Other things that we're going to talk about today that she can do is deploy the Bester Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle. This is a vehicle that has the capability to dock with other submarines and rescue crew members. The Shelf Autonomous Atomic Power Generating Unit. She can deploy those, and she has already deployed these in the Arctic on the seafloor. She also has an unmanned underwater vehicle called the Clavin 2P that is very capable with its high-resolution sonar to find small objects around the area. Completely untethered, autonomous, working on its own, and it can come back and dock in this little hangar behind the sail on its own. But the big thing here is that this is still a warship. She has a fully functional torpedo room in the bow with both 53-centimeter torpedo tubes and very large, approximately 1.5-meter torpedo tubes, two of them that can shoot the Poseidon missile or Poseidon atomic torpedo that we'll talk about at the end of the lecture. So here is Shelf. Shelf is a self-contained, in a hardened, waterproof case, nuclear reactor that runs itself to generate electricity. These things are already operational and deployed in the Arctic, and they power the Russian SOSUS system up there. This is the Bester DSRV. Like I said, it can go down and rescue crews from stricken submarines, but can also do research because it has the ability to manipulate things outside the hull at very deep depths. And so she can go down there, pick things up, recover items that are lost at sea, or manipulate undersea cables like we've seen them do. But this is a crewed submarine, like 3 people inside this as they operate it. This is the Clavin 2P. This is the unmanned autonomous vehicle, completely untethered, that is launched from its own hangar on the top of the submarine, just behind the sail. This thing has a very high-resolution side-scan sonar, so as it swims out from the submarine, it can begin looking in the vicinity for objects that are very small, detect them, and then communicate that location back to the Belgorod, who can then send the Low Sharq or other submarines out to go retrieve them. All right, so here's the Low Sharq here. This is a nuclear-powered mini-sub. It has a crew of about 10 men. Currently, it was damaged in a fire in 2019 and remains in dry dock conducting repairs at the time of this recording. So while it is technically operational, it's still being repaired. So they're back to using the Paltus, which is a conventionally powered version of this deep mini sub. But this sub is the new version of their mini subs, can go very deep, greater than 3,000 feet, has lights and a manipulator arm on the bottom, can move things around, do some work on the bottom from inside the submarine. All right, this is Harmony. Harmony is the Russian SOSUS system, and they've built their SOSUS system instead of in the Atlantic and the Pacific like we did. They built theirs in the Arctic because they want to own the Arctic. Russia wants to own the Arctic going forward. And they already have this Harmony sonar system established. It is powered in part by the submersible nuclear reactors. It also has shore-based power and reception, and it is a large network of bottom-moored hydrophones that communicate back to shore facilities any acoustic detections that it has. This is a very capable, just as capable as our SOSUS submarine, and it's operational. This is the problem, though. This is what the Belgorod can do. The Poseidon is an intercontinental, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed, autonomous torpedo. So it can go out, be launched from the Belgorod on its own for long periods of time until it needs maintenance, which could be weeks or months even, and swim the oceans of the world on its own on a predetermined course and track. It is completely unmanned, so it can stay for long periods of time submerged, doesn't need to come up to replenish air or anything because there's no people on board. And because it's nuclear powered, it doesn't need to regenerate any kind of battery or anything. So once it's launched, it can stay submerged for its entire duration, including a return to port if it wants to, because there's really no limit in terms of range. The limit here is time. How long can it run before it breaks down because it's unmanned and nuclear powered? Its warhead is a several megaton warhead. First reports and claims really by Russia was that it was 2 Tsar bombs back-to-back, 100 megatons total. That turns out to be complete bunk. Lots of current estimates measure this weapon at 2 megatons, which is still an enormous warhead. Don't think that just because it's not 100 megatons, everything's fine. A 2 megaton detonation anywhere, whether it's below the water or in the air, is a large nuclear weapon. But this thing is designed to explode underwater, creating a tidal wave towards all directions because it's going to radiate 360, right? But it is also salted with cobalt-60, which makes that radiation relatively nasty. Cobalt-60 sticks to everything it touches, whether it's on land or in the water, and it will remain there for, estimates are, about 100 or more years. So this is a nuclear radioactive, if you will, tidal wave going out in all directions from the explosion of this thing. This is a nasty, nasty weapon, and it started sea trials in 2019. This is also operational, and the Belgorod that just came into service can shoot it. They can hold up to 6 of these on board at any one time. Yeah, so this is a very, very scary weapon. Now, let's talk about some of the limitations and defenses that the West has come up with. One, it's autonomous, but predetermined. So we don't see any way to communicate with this device after it's launched. And that's a huge limitation because that means that the weapon is programmed to go and detonate before it's launched, or it's not going to detonate at all. It's just going to go out and do a patrol and then return back to base. This weapon, by the way, cannot return back to the Belgorod after it's launched. It's not recoverable. It has to be recovered by a special surface ship that they used to recover it during sea trials, and that was in the White Sea, back towards Russia. So if they do deploy this thing at sea, it's either going to attack its target, or it's just going to patrol for who knows how long, and then eventually either sink to the bottom because it broke, and doesn't work anymore, or it's going to return to port where it can then be recovered by a special recovery ship. Okay, it has no evasion capability. So if we do detect this thing and we decide to attack it, it will not even realize it's being attacked because it doesn't have a sensor for that. And it doesn't have the ability really to evade any kind of incoming threat. It does have what appears to be a collision avoidance sensor on the nose, but we're not 100% sure on that. But it would make sense that there is some collision avoidance sensor on this thing so it doesn't, lawn dart itself into the ground like a Seawolf submarine. It has no radio communication antennas, but that doesn't mean you can't communicate with it. There are such things as coded underwater acoustic communications. That's been around for decades. Russia's had it for, just as long as anybody else. And so there are ways to communicate with this, but those are really low bandwidth and limited in range. And but with no radio antenna, it would be their only option if they're going to do that. As far as a strategic weapon goes, it's a lot slower than an ICBM. ICBM can get anywhere in the world in about 30 minutes or less, depending on how far it's got to go. This could take several days to get to where it's going to be, because while it is very fast, speeds estimated anywhere from 50 knots to, I saw an estimate upwards of 80 knots, which I think is a little ridiculous. But most consensus say that this thing runs around at about 50 knots when it's not trying to be stealthy, which means it can be detected acoustically. And so the Western perspective on this weapon right now, quoting General Mathis back when he was in charge during the previous administration, his comments on this was that this weapon changes nothing because we already have mutually assured destruction. So if they use this weapon, it's just going to ensure mutual destruction. Therefore, we shouldn't worry about it. I think that's a very nihilistic way of looking at this weapon. But our approach to defending against this right now, because we don't have anything else to do it with, is we're going to detect it on our SOSUS arrays, and I believe that that's true. So we'll be able to localize where it is, how fast it's going, and then send assets out to it. If we have to stop it, if we had to stop one of these today, our only option would be to airdrop torpedoes in the path of it and hope that our torpedoes can home on this torpedo that's running at about 50 knots under the water. A secondary way of doing it would be to get another submarine asset in the path of it, and we'd have to be a little bit lucky to do that, and then launch a weapon from the bow at it, hoping that this thing didn't take any kind of erratic maneuver right before it hit. Again, because the weapon doesn't appear to have any ability to detect an incoming attack, it probably can't evade, and so we are hoping, you know, the NATO as a whole, but especially the United States, that we can stop this weapon if we need to with our own weapons. As of right now, there is no public information. There haven't been any kind of congressional hearings that are public that we have a program designed to counter this, as we do have many programs designed to develop and counter hypersonic weapons. So we are really behind the 8 ball on trying to get a program in place to counter this threat. Now, eventually, I'm sure we'll come up with something, but right now, we haven't even begun to take this threat seriously. That's really the purpose of this video, is to tell you that the platform that launches the Poseidon torpedo is now operational. It will be stationed in the Pacific Fleet by the end of this year. We could see these things in the water by Christmas, and we haven't even begun starting a specialized program to counter this threat yet. Right now, our plan is to detect using SOSUS and other acoustic sensors, and then use air assets to get ahead of it and drop weapons on it if we need to. That's the plan. But if that doesn't work, folks, there's going to be a nuclear tsunami contaminated with cobalt-60 coming on shorelines anywhere in the vicinity of this weapon. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye. Surf's up.